Welcome to the HRKyle Podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on leadership, job searching, and all things human resources. I'm your host, HRKyle, and each week we dive deep into topics relevant to professionals seeking to elevate their careers and organizations. Whether you're a seasoned leader, a job seeker navigating the ever-changing landscape of employment, or an enthusiast looking to stay ahead of the curve, this is the podcast for you. Join me as we explore practical strategies, share expert insights, and engage in meaningful conversations that empower you to succeed in today's dynamic workplace. So, adjust your headphones and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another edition of the HRKyle Podcast. Once again, I'm HRKyle. And today I'll be inviting Becki back. That's HRKyle Becki to join me as my co-host. Becki, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Great to be here.
Well, great to have you, of course. Today we're going to be talking about something that is near and dear to more than a few of my listeners, and that's the topic of career transitions. And I know so many of you at one point or another, it would seem, have either thought about or actually gone through a career transition. So we're going to talk about this in segment one. Becki and I will have a nice discussion around the topic and share some of our experiences. And then in segment two, we're going to have a man who's an expert on career transitions. In fact, he had a long and storied career in the entertainment industry. He was an agent, producer, and executive. And I'm pretty darn sure that he's worked on more than a few shows or movies that you're familiar with. But after being in that industry for nearly 3 decades, he made the decision to make a career transition. And since then, he's been a world-renowned speaker on the topic. And again, he'll be joining us in segment 2. But before we get to all of this, we do need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit HRKyle.com today. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that break, learning more about some of the things that we're involved with here at HRKyle. And again, the topic of the day today is career transitions. And Becki, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead our discussion.
Thanks, Kyle. As usual, great to be here. And I love this topic because, I personally have gone through this. And you have graciously helped me through this topic as well. So let's get started. Tell me some of the biggest challenges that people face when transitioning to a new career.
Well, we can go over the obvious ones, and we will, but one of the biggest ones is the psychological part. Getting this idea in their head that career transition just isn't an option. They've been in that particular career, whatever it may be, for a number of different years, and they're kind of stuck. And I hear that both from a career standpoint and sometimes from an industry standpoint. For example, someone that's been in the restaurant industry for a number of years or retail will get the idea in their head that they're just stuck. They can't transition out of it. Or someone that's been in a profession that they look at and say, oh my gosh, I can't transition out of being a teacher. There's nothing that would equate to that in the quote unquote real world. So the first and the biggest thing is just getting over that psychological, I can't do this or this isn't an option for me. Beyond that, it's also taking the time to sit down and go through this exercise of getting to know yourself and what you want to do next. And I think that's a big part of it too, realizing that whatever career that you were in, that served you well. Obviously, you enjoyed it. There was something that you were probably drawn to at a point. But as we get older and as things change in our lives, sometimes our career interests change. And again, it could be for a number of different reasons. So the second thing is just getting past all that of guilt or the feelings or what have you, and just taking the time to sit down and go through that analysis. And again, a lot of people, for whatever reason, can't or don't want to take that time. Maybe they've got other obligations or things that they just feel like they don't have the time to go through the necessary steps. So they end up being stuck in this job and this career that they're just not getting satisfaction from anymore. And after a while, it becomes a vicious cycle because they feel guilt and upset and bad feelings, but they can't break out of that to take the next step to go through the analysis and work on making a change, because it does take work. And again, as you mentioned, you've been through this. It takes a little bit of work to go through a career transition. But I think that you would also admit that it's worth the effort.
Yes, definitely. And I was going to mention that it becomes a full-time job just to do that transition. Not just looking for a job, but again, trying to figure out ways to make that transition work for you and with the employer that you're going to go with.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I hate to use the analogy, but it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And I think if you approach it that way, that also helps you get past that hurdle of thinking, oh, God, I've got to go through this. Because what that means is you can devote a certain amount of time each day to the effort. It doesn't have to be all accomplished in one day. You can make a goal for yourself, like you and I did when we were going through this for you, of saying, okay, in the next 6 months, in the next 8 months, I'm going to work on this transition and I'm going to make it happen. And a year from now, I'm going to be in a totally different job in a totally different place. And I think when you break it down like that, it becomes more this feeling of I can accomplish this. It's like the old analogy, what's the best way to eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time.
Right. Again, it's just, I think about my situation, and I was thinking outside of the box, not necessarily teaching, but going into, because I had people background. So I'm in a nonprofit now and working with people.
Well, and the other thing that you built into yours was and we can say this on air, you came from education. That's where you had spent most of your career, whether it was in a classroom and administrative roles or what have you. So you managed to incorporate that into your new role as well, because that was something that was important to you. It was a passion of yours, and it was something that was a priority. So having that environment and being able to have that impact in an educational environment, that's still there in your new role.
Right, exactly. And kind of leading into my next question, obviously I have become a success story. Can you share any other success stories of significant career transition and the key factors you think that contributed to that success?
Well, if you don't mind, we'll keep it in the family. I think yours is a great example. I'll share mine, but mine goes back a few years. And it might be a story that might resonate with some of our listeners. So when I was growing up and so on, there wasn't a lot of talk about career and college. I shouldn't even say there wasn't a lot. There wasn't any talk about career and college and so on. And it wasn't because I was not a good student and all that. It's just the nature of the situation. So I came out of high school having no idea what I was going to do next. But I did at a point over that summer after graduating decide, hey, I guess I better go to college, and I better at least get a 2-year degree, an associate degree. So I did that. And when I came out, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a degree in business. And I actually worked in sales and marketing for, about 5 years. And those are relatively easy jobs to come by, especially the more entry-level type jobs. And I was a younger guy back then. But for me, after a while, those became very unsatisfying. So I made the decision to go back to school. And as Becki mentioned, there's a lot of effort that goes into that. So after 5 years, I had already established myself. So I had a car and I had a place to live and all that. So I had a lot of expenses. So I took a job working second shift, taking temporary assignments, and I would go to school during the day and work second shift. And I committed to that over what amounted to just a little bit over a 5-year span to get my bachelor's and then to get my master's. And then while I was in college, I got a couple of internships as well. And that's how my transition worked. I ended up getting a degree in psychology and then a master's in HR. So I was exploring my options as far as careers when I was going through college to see what fit, and that came through informational interviews. I did a few of those. As I mentioned, I did an internship. I talked to different people about different careers. I did some career assessments back then because that was interesting to me anyways. So I would consider my journey, and again, I'm not being braggart here. I guess maybe I am, but I would consider this a successful journey because we're 26 years later and I'm working in this field. But I think to your prior points, it requires a research. It requires, understanding yourself and what your interests are and what else you want to do in this world. And it does require the time and the commitment.
Right.
But I think we would both contend that it's worth it.
Yes, definitely. And one of your comments about that you had expenses, and I think that scares a lot of people that, if I transition, what if I'm making less money? What if I'm making $15,000 less? Then, how am I going to pay my bills?
Oh, I was.
Yeah, that's a great concern for people. How do they get past that?
Well, I think you have to look at your expenses and see how you can adjust them. You work to get a less expensive vehicle, which I did. You work to get a less expensive apartment, which I did. You work to make sure that you're not driving as far, so you're not wasting gas money. You get creative with a lot of things in your life to save money. And I think the other thing you realize is for part of this, you're going to have to give up some things for a few years to get where you want to be. So, when I was going through my master's, I lived in a little 1-bedroom apartment, and it was tiny. We didn't spend a lot of money on food or anything else. And the cars were old, and I took the bus a lot, and I did those things. And like I say, I worked full time on top of that. So you realize that for a short period of time, you're going to sacrifice for more of a long-term payout. And I would do it all over again. The 5 years that it took me to get where I am now with the degrees and everything, I'd do it in a heartbeat because 26 years later, I'm still reaping the benefits from that.
Well, and that's what I was going to add on to that sometimes you have to take a few steps backwards to get forward. So.
Yeah. Yep. 1 step back, 2 steps forward. That's exactly right.
Exactly. Talk to me about how individuals can identify those transferable skills that's going to help them succeed in that new industry or the role.
Well, one of the biggest things is you've got to look at the skills that you're currently using in your job. And remember, when we talk about skills, we're not talking about responsibilities. Skills and responsibilities are two different things because sometimes people get caught up in the responsibilities and think, well, geez, there's no job that does this. I'd use the teacher example again because that's the one that's closest to us. One of the responsibilities is standing in front of a class of students and, talking about math. Well, yeah, that's a responsibility as a math teacher. But what are the skills? Well, the skills are public speaking. It's preparing the materials. It's answering questions. It's classroom management. Those are the skills. So it's looking at your responsibilities and get a copy of your job description. My goodness, you should have one anyways. If you don't, your company's not doing right by you. So get that copy of that job description and go through each one of those responsibilities and define it as to what skills are required. And the other thing you can do is in so many job descriptions, you'll see a requirements section. And the requirements section will speak to the degree and the experience. But what it'll also speak to is all the other skills required. Like it'll say, written and verbal communication, time management, organization skills. It'll say those kind of things. Well, those are skills. Those are all the skills. So that job description, which I'm a big proponent of job descriptions, that's just huge in so many ways, not the least of which working through a career transition. And don't even get me started on job descriptions because if you don't have one, we need to talk. We absolutely need to talk. And if you're a company that doesn't have them, we should be talking immediately.
Well, and I know you mentioned the resume, and I know that's a whole nother topic, but, one of the reasons I think that I was able to obtain this transitional job that I have is along with your help, I use that job description and fit my resume to the job.
Yep. And I talk about that time and again. I know people probably get tired of it, my articles and blogs and so on, but you have got to tailor the collective have to tailor your resume and your cover letter to the job you're applying to, regardless of what it is. And you say, well, how do I do that? Well, again, The tools are there. How do you do it? You get that job posting and you set side by side your skills list that we just talked about, and you compare it to what they're looking for, that they say they're looking for in that job ad. And then you craft that resume and you craft that cover letter based upon that.
Right. And going along with that, I know in my last job search, I had 5 or 6 different resumes according to the job.
Yep, exactly. Well, whoever gave you that advice really gave you some really great advice.
I know,
don't know who that would have been.
Right?
Yeah.
Wonder who that was.
But exactly. But I think the good lesson here is, gang, who all of you listening, these are things I talk about. You say, oh yeah, the guy's talking about this stuff. I can guarantee you everything I've ever talked about now, then, and in the future, I'm a proponent of it. That's what I do, whether it's for the business, working with clients or whatever. And here's Becki, another example. She had 5 different resumes. Did it take a little extra work? Yeah. But she's a year plus into a job that she's really, really liking. And more importantly, she's thriving in.
Right. And on top of that, I had multiple offers to go in for interviews, which I didn't get in the past by having these very distinct resumes.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you have turned down jobs.
Yes.
And again, you're a career transition person, and these were not jobs that mirrored what you had done before. Like these weren't classroom teaching jobs or anything even close to that.
Nope, they sure weren't.
Yeah. And the other thing too that I'm going to speak to that's necessary in this, and again, I talk about it all the time, but yeah, I do it and I recommend it. You also were very active in pursuing jobs. And I talk about this all the time. I've got an article that's coming out real soon on this. You got to follow up, send a resume and so on, and then follow up with the company, which you did. And you even said, hey, if I've got to go into the business and talk to the receptionist and see what I need to do to follow up, I'll do it. And you did.
Right.
And so that follow-up's necessary. The other thing, networking. Working on your network, and networking in the sense that what are you giving? You're giving as much as you're taking.
Right. Yeah. And again, the follow-up, with this position I have right now, I made a phone call. Mm-hmm. They weren't even hired. I mean, they didn't have anything posted. Right. But I made a phone call and talked to the manager, and she said, send me a resume. And I was in there the next day for an interview.
Well, and, again, not to shamelessly promote my book, but those are the things I talk about in my book and my article. Make a list of companies that you want to work for, and, have your reasons why you want to work for them. And you had yours, and you made a list, and then you pursued those opportunities. And again, people think, oh, this is theoretical or whatever. I can assure you right now, and I mean this, there's nothing I talk about that's theoretical. It's proven. These are as close to laws as I can come up with. And here's another one.
Agree.
Yeah.
And I love the idea about not necessarily finding the job that you want, but find the company that you want to work for.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Well, and I tell you, I've been on both sides of that. And I've hired people before that never worked in a company like ours, but they had such an enthusiasm for what we were doing and what it was about that I hired them. And they turned out to be great employees because you know what? We could train them.
Right, exactly.
We could train them on the job. What we couldn't train them on is enthusiasm for what we did and what the company was about.
Right. Well, Kyle, let's finish up. This has been a great conversation, but let's finish up with the advice that you could give to someone who's hesitant. There are going to be people, many of them, hesitant to leave their job, different career path. Tell them some advice.
Well, the biggest thing I would say now, based upon everything we've covered, if you're sitting here now at the end of our discussion hesitant, click rewind and listen to this episode again, because I don't think you were listening closely. The key messages are, yes, it's possible. Yes, people do it. You're talking to people that have done it. We've given you the formula on how to do it, and we've shown you that it's worth your while. So I don't know what else we could go over, what else that I could say. But again, if you're sitting here now at this point in this podcast saying, geez, I'm just so not sure. Either you really don't want to make the change or you weren't listening. So please hit rewind and listen to it again, because I want to see people happy in what they do. Life's short. We have to work generally. Get in a job in a company that you want to work for. And if you're not, make the change. You can. People do it all the time. It's not scary. Might be a little bit of heavy lifting for a little bit, but do it. You'll be more than happy that you did.
And my recommendation, I'm going to promote you a little bit here, is to reach out to Kyle. I mean, obviously, we've talked through this whole thing about him helping me through these steps and working through and giving me the right advice. So reach out to Kyle, and he'll definitely help you.
Yep, I'm happy to. And you will make a change. You will end up in some place that you're happy. I guarantee it.
I agree.
Well, Becki, I'm looking at the clock. I think we made good use of our time here in segment one. Enjoyed talking with you as always. Thank you for sitting in with me. I think we make a habit of this at this point.
We do, I know, and I certainly am enjoying it.
Great. Well, folks, we hope you're enjoying it as well. This is the end of segment one. We covered a lot here. Hope you're able to take away a few things or more than a few things that you can use as you work through a career transition. But before we get into segment two and the guests I'm really excited to talk to, let's take a quick break and we'll share a little bit more about what's going on here at HRKyle. So we'll be right back after this. Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit HRKyle.com today.
Are you stuck in a job you hate? Dreaming of a career that excites you? It's time to turn those dreams into reality with Get the Job You Love by Kyle Patrick Smith, also known as HRKyle. Discover proven strategies to land your dream job, master interviews, and stand out from the crowd. Packed with expert advice and practical tips, Get the Job You Love is your ultimate guide to career success. Available now on Amazon and other online retailers. Don't wait. Start your journey to a fulfilling career today. Get the job you love, because you deserve a job you love.
Welcome back to segment two of the HRKyle Podcast. I'm your host, of course, HRKyle. And the theme for tonight's episode is career transitions. And it's not a coincidence we chose that theme because it's so popular amongst especially the clients and candidates and so on that I work with on a regular basis. But we're fortunate in segment two to have someone that clearly is an expert around this topic. Now, his name is John Tarnoff, and John has a long and storied career in the entertainment industry. He was an agent at a point. He's been a producer as well as an executive. And I can guarantee you he's worked on at least one project that you've either heard of and or seen on the small or big screen. But he's also very familiar with this concept of career transitions. He's been through a few himself, and he also works with clients literally around the world who are working through especially mid-career transitions. So we're fortunate to have John on the episode tonight. And John, welcome to the HRKyle Podcast.
Kyle, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, John, I gave you a little bit of an intro, but I know I didn't do you justice. Would you mind taking a moment to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, as you said, I come to the podcast with a background in entertainment, long 35-year career in entertainment that went from the 70s all the way into the 2000s. My last job in entertainment was for DreamWorks Animation. I left that company in 2010. And it was a long and checkered career. It's a very volatile business. I kind of dine out on the fact that I've been fired from my entertainment career jobs 39% of the time. And I came up with that strange statistic during my TEDx talk in 2012. The topic of that day was transformation, not too dissimilar from transition. And I wanted to kind of present my bona fides and share why I felt entitled to talk about career transformation and career transition, because of course I had been through so many of them. And calculating the jobs that I held over my 35 years in entertainment, the ones that I left, the ones where they were just ended, kind of consulting deals or film projects that I was working on, versus the ones where I was let go. Those 7 jobs where I was let go came up to statistically 39% of the time. And that got a big laugh when I shared that with the audience. Nervous laugh. But I think what the laugh was about was this fact that, who talks about this stuff? Who talks about being fired as a statistic? And I think it goes to one of the important lessons regarding career transitions today, which is that getting fired is no longer a mark of shame. It really is, in our very disrupted, fast-paced economy, an indication of fit. It really is a question of how you fit into the organization, what the role is that you were hired for. Things will likely have changed, as I'm sure you know and probably have shared on this podcast. Job tenure is a lot shorter than it used to be. The average job tenure across generations is somewhere between 3 to 5 years. It's even less for younger generations, a little bit more for older generations. But you don't see these, 15, 20, 30-year careers anymore, or 30-year jobs anymore, because things are moving too fast. So if you feel like, there's something wrong with you because, you're out of a job, you feel like, even if it was a big layoff, why did they fire you and not fire the guy next door? It really is out of your control. It's really about the transition that companies are going through. It's not about you. So that is, I think, one of the most important identity-related questions to understand about career transition. And I had to adjust to this in a very volatile business where I saw administration changes and marketing changes and all sorts of reasons why you want to adjust your staff. And that gave me, I think, a healthy perspective on what it took to be self-reliant. And when I moved from my corporate career into coaching, that became a really important theme for me to work on with my clients. And I serve clients primarily in mid-career, people who are usually, 45 to 55, who are usually director level and above, who have achieved a certain amount of success in their careers, but who are in this very vulnerable period of life and career where you kind of get to this point where you've kind of been there, done that. You've built up a book of work, a set of experiences, skills, talents that you've exercised. And when you get to mid-career, you kind of think, okay, well, now what? What else is there for me to do? Where am I going? And this is happening just at the moment when the corporate institutions are kind of looking at you as being time to go, where they're looking at you as kind of a little bit long in the tooth. So with the changes in longevity and in health, people don't want to retire the way they used to at 60, 65. There's a lot more work ahead for most of us who get into this career stage. So the question becomes, well, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with ageism? How do you deal with old biases that don't seem to want to go away in the workforce, that underrate the value of older workers? Again, this goes back for me to self-reliance and the self-reliance skills that I built up in my entertainment career, coupled with a psychology degree, which I took when I was in a key transition at the beginning of 2001, 2002, that era, after the tech startup that I had grown in the mid to late 90s was wiped out with the tech bubble bursting in 2001. So I decided to take the psychology degree really to learn more about myself, about my behavior, and how to engage with people, and to learn more about human nature, and see if I could use that as a foundation for this next phase of my career. So that kind of gives you a bit of a broad view of the last 30, 40 years, and some of the factors that have influenced me in leading into the work that I do now.
John, there's a lot to take from what you just shared, certainly from your history, but I think from a listener perspective, there's a couple of key points here. One, transitions are inevitable. That's the world we live in. Number two, as you shared, it's not personal. It's not about the person. It's about the organization. And we don't even need to put labels on it, good, bad, or otherwise. It's not something to be ashamed of because the world we live in now, it's inevitable. And I think the other thing that I would draw from what you shared is a lot of the transition isn't so much about your skills, background, and experience as getting over some of the psychological aspects that are involved in the job loss or leaving that prior employer and making that transition. And as you said, the complexity too that exists with mid-career changes. So pivoting a little bit from that in thinking about your career and the transitions that you made, what are some of the significant challenges that you personally faced that now you're passing those lessons on to your clients as they go through the transition?
It's a really interesting question. I think that the first thing that comes up for me in that arena is this idea that you are much more than your resume. And when we are coming out of a job, particularly a job that we've held for a certain number of years, you build up a certain identification with the company, with the people that you've worked with the role that you have. If you're client facing, those relationships become very important. And all of a sudden that is kind of ripped away from you, pulled out from under you, and you lose this sense of who you are because you're so wrapped up in identifying with this larger structure that has, after all, sustained you and really enriched your life. You've learned a lot, probably you've done a lot, and it's a significant part of your waking hours to be at work. And some of the most significant day-to-day relationships that you have developed are with your job. So understandably, it's a very hard thing to get out of. And I think the lesson for me in pivoting in the jobs that I've had is to be able to both appreciate all of the value of the work and the relationships and the organizations that you work with, but at the same time understand that there's a lot counterbalancing that's inside you that you're contributing, and the contributions that you made in this job to these people are contributions that you will be able to make again in the next job. So I think it's really important to have that sense of counterbalance between this external identification and appreciation for the environment that you're in, the relationships that you've made, but also to kind of be or recognize that you are the author of those relationships and of that value. So you're going to be able to apply that again in your next role, and you'll be able to represent that, pitch that successfully to other employers who are looking for the kind of background and results that you're going to be able to deliver.
Well, John, a lot of wisdom there. And it reminds me of the fact that typically when you meet a person and you say, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself, you're exactly right. They will typically lead with, or one of the first things they will share is their job title and the company that they work for. And as you've said, that becomes so much entrenched in their identity that in some ways they lose sight of they're really more than just that job title and that company role. So I love that advice that you're sharing there. And I hope our listeners take that to heart. Folks, we're talking to John Tarnoff. John is a world-renowned, I should say, expert on career transitions and working with clients in his role as far as mid-career changes. John,
I just want to pick up on something that you just said about about this identification with the work and the introductions that we make, and our language doesn't serve us here because, as you say, if you're introduced to someone and the question is, what do you do? The answer invariably is, I am and maybe it's the title or it's the role. I am VP of this, or I am a sales executive, or whatever it is. But you're phrasing this as a identity, as a beingness. I am this, even though the question was, what do you do? Right? The proper answer from a language point of view should be, I work as this role, right? But I am not that role. I am more than that. This is just the work that I do. We don't do that. The language isn't set up that way, but it's an important distinction to make in our minds as we're going through these transition processes, to recognize that we are not our job.
Oh, John, you make me smile as you say that, because as part of my work, I work with clients on, I don't do the resume, but I do some resume analysis and provide them advice on enhancing their resume. And one of the pieces of advice that I give them that fits perfectly with what you just shared was, don't use those bullet points under that company name and that job title to list your responsibilities. Instead, list your accomplishments, the things that you did, the impact that you made. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I think it's an important point that people really want to pay attention to. When you're putting your resume together, your LinkedIn profile, your experience section, you want to be talking about results, not responsibilities, because responsibilities are great, but it's not what the employer wants to hear. They want to know how you moved the needle, and they want to know with whom did you do that. So it's not just about you, it's about your relationships with your team and with your supervisors and your clients. You want to talk about relationships as well as accomplishments.
But as you said, those things are what make you unique. And that's how you differentiate yourself from just being another cog in the wheel, so to speak.
Exactly.
Well, John, believe it or not, we're up against the clock here.
Yes.
As far as time goes,
to the next one. Yeah.
We've made great use of our time. I'll ask you this one last question. We've got just about a minute. When you look back on your career, what advice, if you had to give just one sentence or two of advice to someone considering a transition like you've been through, what are you going to tell them?
Focus on building relationships, not on job applications.
Love it. I just spoke to a group today of people that are going through a program and they'll eventually be looking for jobs. And I told them, you know what? I don't post a lot of jobs because usually I'm just working my network.
Yeah, it's all about the network. The network is the net worth, all the cliches around there. And if you're going to really program for a long and successful career, it's all about the people, all about the relationships.
Amen. Folks, we've been talking to John Tarnoff. John had a long and storied career in the entertainment industry before he became an advisor and a consultant and a partner to those who are working through career transitions, especially mid-career. He's joined us tonight to share some of his wisdom. And John, we really appreciate you joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure.
Folks, thank you as well for joining us for another edition of the HRKyle Podcast. And as I say every time, and I mean it just as much, we appreciate your listenership. I'm going to leave you with these three thoughts, though. Stay focused, stay grounded, and please stay tuned. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HRKyle Podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HRKyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at HRKyle.com. That's HRKyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.